Pablo, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? JP, good to see you as well. Evening, brother. How you doing? How you been? Greetings, Burberry. Good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been, brother? How's things? Hey, brother Miles on CMF. Comatose, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Hello, Miles on CMF. Scott, good to see you as well, brother. How you doing? How you been? Evening, Miles on CMF. Jason, good to see you as well, brother. How you doing? How you been? Miles, low. Okay. Good evening, brother Miles and CMF family. Funky brother, good to see you. So how you doing? How you been? Sad day, R.I.P. Uzi? Ozzy? What happened, commenters? Good evening, Miles and CMF. Bullock, Soppy, good to see you. So how you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles, good to see you again. Autistic, good to see you. So how you doing? How you been? Evening, Miles. Mac, good to see you, so brother. How you doing? How you been? Okay, by the time everyone tunes in one by one, let's go through the intro, the disclaimer, and what we're going to go through on tonight's live. How are you doing, Miles? I'm doing great. Feels good to see you. How are you doing? How you been? So, welcome to the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, the CMF stands for Crypto Miles Family. My name is Miles, and this is episode 339 of the CMF Live. In this live, essentially Monday to Friday, I talk about the most recent news that's happening around the world in terms of cryptocurrency, CBDCs, AI, politics, regulations, pretty much everything you need to know about regarding the world completely transforming into a digital space. We also do Q&As on this live as well, which means if you do have any questions at any point in the live, just put it down inside the comment section. I'll be more than happy to help you out. The disclaimer of this live also is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. So, welcome to the CMF Live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, if you're regular, let's go CMF. By the way, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who has already liked and retweeted this live. If you're watching this on X, so far we have 5 retweets and 7 likes. Thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who has already liked and retweeted this live. And also, if you watch on YouTube, thank you so much to you as well for liking the live on YouTube and putting a comment outside the live. Also, hashtag and whatever you want, even inside of X, hashtag whatever you want outside the comment section on the live. Now, on tonight's live, we are going to be talking about the Senate. So there's a new market structure, essentially legislation that could be passed or could be looked into, which we're going to go through on tonight's live. We're going to talk about Trump on tonight's live as well, because Trump is apparently coming close to a deal with Thailand, which is great. This whole tariff scenario is moving forward. We have essentially other regulations to go through. We have banking news to go through. We have the Fed news to go through regarding is Jerome Powell going to be resigning or is he going to be fired or how that situation is going to go. We're going to talk about new partnerships on tonight's live as well, new banking partnerships with the crypto space also. So there's a mixture of news to go through on tonight's live regarding how much essentially the blockchain space is connecting more every day to the traditional essentially financial sector, especially straight after these 3 regulations were passed. And obviously the first news that we're going to be covering on tonight's live is regarding the Senate, which is quite much a big news, you could say, regarding a market structure essentially happening around the Clarity Act. So before we go through this news, let's go inside the comment section again, and then we go straight into the first news. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you have any questions or statements to make, put it down inside the comment section. More than happy to essentially help you out. So let's see what's happening inside the comment section, then we go straight into the next news. Good evening, Miles and CMF. Or good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hello, Miles. I hope that you had a good day. Let's go XRP and XDC. Let's go, Scott. Good evening, Miles and CMF. Free and forever. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hi, Miles and CMF. Stormy. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Miles and family. Ian. Good to see you. How you doing, Ian? How you been? Evening, Miles and them. Susie, good and family. Susie, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Miles. How are you? I'm doing great. Kindly good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Miles XDC question mark. What do I think about XDC? What I've always thought about XDC, it's going to do tremendously well on the regulations as we move forward. It's in the financial sector. The number one category inside the crypto space has always been the financial sector, XRP, XLM, XDC. These types of projects will do tremendously well on the regulations, especially now that we're in regulations. Day by day, things are going to get better for the financial sector. Hello, Miles and CMF. Lena, good to see you. So how you doing? How you been? Now, first news on tonight's live. The Senate apparently is shaking up the crypto, essentially, regulations, you could pretty much say. So here it is. Senate shakes up crypto with major new market structure, essentially, draft. The U.S. Senate Banking Committee has introduced a long-awaited, essentially, draft bill to reshape how digital assets are classified and regulated inside the United States. This could have some benefits regarding the Ripple case that's going on with the SEC. Titled the Responsible Financial Innovation Act of 2025. The draft, introduced by Senate Banking Chair, essentially Tim Scott, alongside Senators Cynthia Lummis, Bill Hagrid, and Bernie Merone, seeks to essentially create a comprehensive legal framework for digital assets, addressing long-standing regulatory uncertainty inside the crypto space. The legislation, released just days after the Genius Act was signed into law, builds on the momentum of the Clarity Act that was just recently passed. One of the bill's most essentially provisions is the explicit recognition that digital assets, referred to as essentially assets, are not inherently securities. It classifies that secondary market transactions involving those tokens should not automatically fall under securities laws. However, expectations apply if a token's value is closely tied to essentially promises of profit through marginal efforts. Security laws could still essentially be triggered. In addition, the draft legislation attempts to resolve the persistent jurisdictional tensions between the SEC and CFTC. Under the proposed framework, most digital assets would be regulated as commodities, falling essentially primarily under the Commodities Futures Trading Commission, CFTC, while the SEC would retain oversight of investment contracts and investor protection matters. No longer will just be the SEC essentially getting hands-on on everything to do with the crypto space. There should be a split of work, and there is. The bill instructs that the SEC to modernize essentially disclosures, rules, and adapt its record-keeping systems to account for blockchain-based financial activity, ensuring compatibility with Web3 ecosystems. Beyond token essentially classification, the legislation spans more than 35 areas of focus. It includes requests for public feedback on topics such as stablecoin regulations, custody frameworks, DeFi exemptions, and illicit finance concerns, including tactics like essentially pig butchering scams, or in other words, pump and dumps. The draft also proposes a safe harbor for forward-thinking statements, shielding essentially developers from premature enforcement actions, provided essentially their projects meet the criteria in terms of transparency and decentralization standards. Additionally, developers who do not custody user funds could be exempt from such registrations and requirements, an important provision for open source innovators. This is great to see, because under Joe Biden's administration, they were trying to regulate the DeFi space in a very awkward and weird way, where it was going to discourage anybody from entering the DeFi space inside the United States. The way the Trump administration is doing it right now is a much more better way. It's much more structured. You could pretty much say they're not putting too much stress on the DeFi space, because it's the DeFi space. Nobody should really be controlling it. Therefore, how are you going to be controlling it yourself is the simplest way to put it. Senator Tim Scott emphasized the bill's collaborative approach, saying this bill gives Congress the opportunity to hear from industry and regulators alike before finalizing a legal framework that essentially protects consumers and encourages responsible innovation. Stakeholder input is now being also solicited, particularly on areas where the SEC and CFTC jurisdictions may overlap, with the Senate Banking Committee hearings expected in the coming weeks. As lawmakers move towards introducing finalized versions, momentum for the U.S. crypto legislation continues to build this week with the new draft legislation after President Donald Trump signed the Genius Act into law, marking a new landmark. Momentum in federal essentially regulations. Industry executives are also watching closely right now. Ian, for example, from Ondo Finance, described the new legislation as the beginning of a new regulatory era inside the United States, pointing to the baptism corporation and the role of key figures like Patrick McHenry. Senator Tim Scott said lawmakers are planning to finalize crypto market structures and legislations by September 30th. So are we going to be getting some more market structures and regulations inside the crypto market space, inside the biggest market space on the planet, the US? By the looks of it, yes. The more we go into regulations, the more liquidity that's going to be entering in from essentially the financial sector, the traditional financial sector, because that's when they feel more comfortable. The better the regulations, the better the regulations are, the more innovation that's going to come through. Also, the more regulations we have, the more essentially we're going to get liquidity coming in from Wall Street, liquidity coming in from major institutional players and executives and CEOs and board members and VCs and angels and hedge funds and essentially family offices will be entering the crypto space due to it now becoming essentially much more regulated place. It's no longer the Wild West or a gray area, which is great to see inside the crypto space. And projects like XRP, XLM, XDC, HBOR, Solana, Cardano, AVAX, there's a lot of crypto projects out there that are going to essentially benefit from these regulations. The more we get regulations as we go along. Now, with the essentially Genius Act, now law and several other bills in motions, the US digital asset space is edging closer to a defined regulatory framework, one that could reshape the crypto sector heading into 2026 is, by the way, what it looks like. And we did have a perspective come in also regarding the matters from Morgan Stanley, who suggested that, moving forward, we're going to essentially head into 2026 and beyond, still in a bull cycle type of scenario, because regulations opens the doors to floodgates of liquidity into the crypto space. It also gives the green light to crypto companies like Ripple, Circle, Kraken, even Binance, or other crypto companies out there to extend essentially expand inside the US market space. It's great to see, hence why essentially, Ripple applying for a bank charter license, so did Circle, so did Coinbase in some sort of a manner, and so did Kraken. All of this is brilliant news that legislations are coming through, it's being discussed, most importantly being looked into and passed. So honestly, I'm loving the idea of all these politicians finally coming forward to create regulations, because that's what's going to split the crypto space. Regulations is going to split the crypto space. And what I mean by that is genuine projects inside the crypto space will do tremendously well. And projects that promise people the world and have no licensing and have no great partnerships in place will do absolutely nothing. And also the decoupling situation, which we're all going to be loving later on, where essentially certain crypto projects will decouple from Bitcoin's footsteps due to utility bases, which is going to be a massive threat to Bitcoin maxis when they realize that projects like XRP, XLM, XDC, Solana, Cardano, AVAX, and so on are going to be going on their separate paths and no longer following Bitcoin's footsteps in this treacherous road of essentially sometimes Bitcoin follows the tech stocks, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it reacts like a safe haven asset, sometimes it doesn't, and so on. We're going to be done with that whole scenario, because then we're going to get the utility. The more regulations we have, the more utility we're going to be having. Simple as. Now, Jerome Powell is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about Jerome Powell, let's go inside the comment section first, and then we'll go straight into the next news. I can see inside the comment section right now that Sam has put a £20 donation. Sam, thank you so much for the £20 donation. Absolutely amazing. He's also put it with a pear character dancing under the rain of confetti and taking his hat off to say, "You're amazing." Sam, thank you so much for the kind word and for the £20 donation. Absolutely amazing. Thanks so much. Now, as I said previously as well, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or statements, put it outside the comment section. What's up, Miles? CMF. Ray, good to see you. How you doing, brother? How you been? Lena, good to see you. How you doing? How you been, Lena? Share the live. Let's go. Scott, can XDC hit $2,000? Can XDC hit $2,000? I'll tell you what. There's probably a lot of questions regarding projects like XDC and XLM and XRP reaching price targets of $100, $500, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000. Is these price targets possible? In my point of view, yes, very possible. Under regulations, not overnight. The idea that it will happen overnight, no. The idea that will happen over time, yes, the sky is the limit when we have regulations. The moment the world fully goes into a digital world and we have 6 billion people on the blockchain, doing transactions 24/7 in terms of the retail section or institutions or essentially centralized banks and so on, certain projects will reach certain price targets that are going to be tremendously high and most people would have never seen coming. Some people did believe it happening and so on. So the idea that a project like XDC can reach $2,000 or XRP or XLM or so on, yes, it's very, very possible. Not overnight, under regulations. The more regulations we have, the more utility that we have over time. The sky is the limit. Nobody can sit there and tell you essentially, no, it's not possible for XRP to reach this price target ever in your lifetime or any sense or so on. No, it's not possible for XDC or HBAR. Those people have zero clue what they're talking about. They would be the same people that would have said pretty much a long time ago Nokia would have survived. They would have been the same people that said Bitcoin was never going to reach $10. They were the same people that said XRP is never going to go above $1. They were the same people that said XRP is never going to go above $3. Those people have zero clue of what they're talking about in any sense. And also those people will bring out essentially will bring out data and statistics of money that's already circulating inside the market space and going, if everything goes on there, it still wouldn't touch that price target. There's a lot of money that's not being counted for. And that money also needs to go digital as well. And then you got to factor in tokenization, the derivatives markets. There's so many market spaces out there that once they come onto the blockchain, the sky is the limit at that point. And let's not forget the burn factor as well. Let's not forget the holders regarding centralized banks or institutions out there. They're going to be buying tremendous amounts of essentially tokens, not using them, just storing them and so on. And there's also institutions out there that will buy a certain essentially ETF, a crypto ETF that will hold on to it for 5 years minimum before they sell, because they're not like the retail section that sells a certain, that buys a certain crypto project and panic sells. So there's a lot of factors to weigh in regarding why certain assets will reach certain price points that most people wouldn't be able to comprehend. You would only be able to understand that if you've ever worked inside a finance, essentially, if you've ever worked inside the financial sector, if you ever understood how this world essentially functions on the good side and the bad side. If you understand both market spaces, you will understand that there's a lot of money that isn't on paper that also needs to go digital. There's also a lot of money on paper that needs to go digital. There's a derivatives markets, there's a bond markets, there's tokenization market for real estate, automotive. There's so many market spaces. There's 6 billion people, so many market spaces. So if you add everything together, certain blockchains will be leading the way. And those blockchains, the sky is the limit in terms of price points. But then, if you ask some people, they'll say, oh, no, it's not possible. It's never going to be possible. Well, one thing people should know about me, for instance, is that I always get the last laugh. I've always had the last laugh. Not because I'm cocky, but because I have a very good understanding of how certain things function. Let's just put it that way. Now, just hope that helps. Hope that helps, everybody. And we're going to XDC kind of reach $2,000. Yes. Good evening, Miles, and can't wait for another great evening. Let's go, Addy. Let's go, Scott. Sam, once again, honestly, thank you for the £20 donation. Absolutely amazing. Evening, Miles, and fellow future XRP millionaires. Let's go, Joe. Hello there, Miles, and the family. Troy, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Hello there, Miles and family. Troy, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Those banks, those 5 banks you mentioned yesterday, opposing XRP's banking chart application, can they slow down or block XRP's application in any way whatsoever? So the 5 essentially banks that I mentioned yesterday, they weren't technically essentially banks. They were banking associations. So what I mentioned yesterday, that essentially I was reading out an article to everyone regarding the news of essentially 5 banking associations that were blocking essentially Ripple and Circle from getting close to a banking charter license, and even essentially Ripple getting close to a Fed Masters account. These 5 banking associations were trying to stop it in its footsteps because they know that Ripple, most importantly, Ripple, out of Circle, Ripple will be the biggest threat to the banking sector, to the traditional banking sector, which also shows that, essentially the SEC that went after Ripple originally, it wasn't about coordination or timing. It was about somebody was weaponizing the SEC to go after Ripple for a reason, because they knew Ripple was going to be a threat somewhere down the road to the banking sector, because Ripple, well, we all know what they're trying to achieve. Ripple wants to be essentially the backbone of the new financial sector, and certain banks and institutions might not like that. That's why the SEC was weaponized to go against Ripple. That's why the CFTC was weaponized against Ripple as well. That's why essentially FDIC was weaponized against Ripple, and the OCC. Well, now times have changed. We have a Trump administration, which is pro-crypto. We have Gary Gensler, who has essentially left the building from the SEC. We have a pro-CFTC, who also dismantled certain groups of the CFTC. We have essentially a pro FDIC, who is no longer telling banks that they can't work with certain crypto companies. And we have essentially pro OCC as well. So can those 5 banking associations essentially tamper Ripple's chances or Circle's chances of getting a banking charter license? No. They might be able to slow it down just by a few days or a few weeks, but other than that, they can't stop it in general. What's going to happen is going to happen, which is Ripple taking over. And as long as Ripple doesn't go public, it means that Ripple is here for a takeover and not a bend over. There's a difference. Companies inside the blockchain space that tend to go public, 2 reasons. 1, they need money. Second reason is they don't mind bending over for bigger financial institutions to assist them on different paths. When certain companies like Ripple don't go public is because they don't want to be controlled and they don't really need money. So can they slow it down? Maybe. Will they be able to stop it from getting a license? No, it's going to happen either way. Whether those banks like it or not, Ripple will get a license and a Fed account. Hi, Miles, CMF family. Hope everyone is doing well. Ronnie, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? How's things? I have a question. My mate called has been reeled recently. I don't know what that means. It's live. Why the restream is at the top right? Why is restream at the top right? Is because restream is the platform I'm using right now to go live on X and YouTube at the same time. So I'm multi-streaming right now. Thanks. No problem, Scott. Anytime. He who laughs last laughs the longest. Let's go, Ian. How's it going, Miles? Hope you're well. Zach, I'm doing great. How you been? Share the live, family members. Let's go, Scott. Now, Jerome Powell, the most hated man in America. Actually, I'll take it back. Jerome Powell, the most hated man in the world in terms of the crypto space. Jerome Powell remains Federal Reserve Chair aimed resignation rumors. So we've had rumors regarding Jerome Powell might be exiting the building the same way Gary Gensler exited the building after Trump essentially went after him and said essentially if he doesn't quit, well, he's going to be fired. So Gary Gensler left by himself. Jerome Powell, on the other hand, he's putting up a fight. He's saying that his rumors of resignation are all false. So here it is. Jerome Powell, current Federal Reserve Chair, has not formally announced any resignation despite recent speculations. Today, he addressed banking stability at a conference, confirming his ongoing commitments to a role. Official channels have reported no changes regarding his position at this essentially particular time. President Trump publicly expressed support for Powell's term essentially continuation. There have been no financial or market disruptions due to these rumors. Core assets like essentially Bitcoin and Ethereum and XRP show no unusual activity maintaining previous performance levels. The resignation essentially topic has historical precedence in causing volatility, yet both traditional and crypto markets remain unaffected currently. On-chain data confirms stable metrics for affected essentially digital assets. Crypto essentially influences and institutions report no discussions or evidence of Federal Reserve instability at present. Powell's essentially recent communications outline the ongoing focus on regulatory essentially improvements and market stability, with no indicators of stepping down whatsoever. Regulatory reviews continue and maintaining the status of Q into essentially both traditional and crypto financial systems. He said, "We need our large banks to be well capitalized and to manage their key risks well. The Fed is a dynamic institution. We're open to hearing new ideas and feedback on how to improve the capital framework for large banks." It's a bit too late is what I would say. Jerome Powell had many chances, 1, to do rate cuts, and 2, be a bit more friendly to a particular crypto space that's about to take over, but he decided to be very negative towards the crypto space for the longest time. And somewhere down the line, he said some nice things, but too late is what I would say. And the rate cuts were still waiting for them. At this rate, we won't be getting rate cuts whatsoever until the day essentially he leaves office. The same way the day Gary Gensler left office is when we saw essentially the lawsuits one by one being dropped. Now, moving on from essentially Gary Gensler's possibility of maybe resigning, maybe not. In his own words, it doesn't look like he's resigning whatsoever. In Trump's words, he might be essentially investigated, but Trump has suggested that he might just have finished his term instead. So let's see how that goes. Now, PNC is what we're going to talk about next. PNC Bank partners with Coinbase to launch crypto services for institutional clients right now. So I'm just loving the idea, essentially, of all of these traditional, essentially, banks, traditional financial systems just partnering up with the blockchain space. It's amazing to see. PNC Bank announced today it will offer cryptocurrency services to institutional and banking clients through a partnership with digital asset exchange Coinbase, making it essentially one of the largest US banks to embrace digital assets at scale. The collaboration leverages Coinbase's crypto as a service platform to provide PNC clients with essentially secure digital asset transactions. PNC will simulate essentially offer traditional banking services to Coinbase, creating essentially reciprocal business relationship between the two companies. Partnering with Coinbase accelerates our ability to bring innovative crypto financial solutions to our clients, said essentially a PNC CEO, William. He also went on to say, this collaboration enables us to meet growing demands for a secure, streamlined access to digital assets on PNC's essentially trusted platform. The partnership appears to have been developing since 2001, since essentially 2021. According to company sources, PNC gains immediate access to cryptocurrencies and markets without building expensive in-house essentially infrastructure or navigating complex regulatory requirements for digital asset custody. Coinbase has been aggressively pursuing partnerships with traditional financial institutions as cryptocurrency interest rebounds among institutional investors. The reason why institutional investors are more interested inside the crypto space now is due to regulations. The company enterprise platform provides back-end compliance tools, custody services, and trading infrastructure that will be costly for banks to develop independently. Therefore, it's just much more easier to partner up with a company like Ripple. This is why essentially a long time ago, the number one question I was asked inside the crypto space was, why would any bank or any institution out there want to partner up with essentially a company like Ripple or Circle or Binance or Coinbase or essentially AVAX or Solana or Cardano, so on. And the number one answer I always give to people when they ask the question of why would any bank want to partner with Ripple? Because it's just easier and cheaper. I said, why would a bank create something that already exists when they can't even get it to the level of what they're competing with? So it's just much more easier for that particular bank to use another platform that already exists. A bank wouldn't go naturally out of the way to create an exact replica of something that already exists. They could just use that service for free because it's free to use the XRP ledger for a bank to create something on it. It's free for them to use the AVAX chain, or free for them to use the Ethereum chain, or free for them to use the Solana chain. Hence why banks never bothered of, most banks, you could say, majority of banks never bothered of creating their own chain. They just ended up using other essentially chains out there because it makes 10 times more sense in terms of you just use basic common sense and logic. Now, PNC is a market leader in delivering essentially best-in-class products for their clients, said essentially Brett, the head of Coinbase Institutional. We're thrilled to support their entry into the digital asset market with a platform built essentially on uncompromising security. The deal gives Coinbase access to PNC's extensive network of corporate, government, and retail clients across the United States. PNC serves as one of the country's largest essentially regional banks, providing significant market reach for Coinbase's institutional services. While several major banks have launched cryptocurrency custody programs or tokenization pilot projects, few have enabled comprehensive essentially trading and functionalities through partnerships with established crypto exchanges. The PNC Coinbase arrangements represents a more ambitious approach to institutional digital asset services. The partnership also emerges as essentially lawmakers move closer to establishing clearer regulatory frameworks for digital assets. As I said, the more regulations we have, the more institutions that will be entering the crypto space. Financial institutions increasingly seek regulated pathways into cryptocurrency markets rather than developing independent solutions, because that just leads to gray areas, which leads to suings. PNC's entry essentially into the crypto services reflects a broader institutional demand for compliant digital asset infrastructure. Traditional essentially banks face pressure to offer essentially cryptocurrency access while maintaining regulatory compliance and operational security. Neither company disclosed specific timelines for service rollouts. Both organizations categorized the initiative as long-term strategy to build resilient, compliant infrastructure supporting the evolving digital asset economy. The collaboration positions essentially PNC Bank among the most progressive traditional banks embracing cryptocurrency integrations, potentially setting precedents for similar partnerships across the financial services and industries. The PNC Coinbase partnership represents a significant step towards mainstream cryptocurrency adoption by traditional banking essentially institutions. The deal combines PNC's established client relationships with Coinbase's specialized digital asset infrastructure, creating a model for regulated crypto services in traditional finance. This is honestly great to see, and it's big news for the entire crypto space. Coinbase and PNC Bank coming together means that, you know, essentially their client base, which is the retail section and the institutional sector through PNC Bank, are going to have some sort of trading services capabilities through their bank to Coinbase, which means liquidity will be entering from PNC Bank into Coinbase that offers a tremendous range of cryptocurrencies. Now, there's a higher chance, obviously, the top 10 to top 20 crypto projects will receive that liquidity compared to the top 50 crypto projects. But that's why I've always said, position yourselves very correctly, especially now that we're in a very heavily regulated market space and heading towards a much more regulations, and we're in an institutional market space right now. So you want to be mainly positioned in crypto projects that institutions will take interest upon to enter into. You don't want to be stuck inside the crypto space, you know, holding a crypto project that only the retail section is interested into. You want to be holding crypto projects that institutions want to be interested also, because they have the money, which means if you're already in that project, they will bring more money and put on top of that project, which means you profit, the simplest way to put it. Enter, or essentially, if you're already in those positions, hold your positions. If you haven't, enter into crypto projects that institutions will take interest upon. It's very simple to put. Not financial advice in any sort of way at all. Now, Western Union is what we're going to talk about next on tonight's live. But obviously, before we do go essentially through Western Union news, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or statements to make, put it down in the comment section. More than happy to answer any questions you may have. So let's go inside the comment section first. Let me go straight into the next news. Let's see where we're at. Inside the comment section, we were at here, I think. Yeah. Good day, Miles and CMF. Mike, good to see you. How you doing? How you been, brother? Let's go, Mike. XRP, XDC, XLM, bro. Let's go, Scott. Good morning, Crypto Miles. Family, hello. Big hello to you. Let's go. Joe's, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Scott says, Miles, I forgot to write in my notes from last evening your thoughts on Flare. Do you mind sharing them again? Thanks. Yes, no problem. Scott, regarding Flare, I think it's a legitimate project from, what I've known about Flare for the longest time. I also know a Flare developer as well. It's a genuine project. It's a good project. For me, it's personally not a must-have project in any sort of a way. Is it going to do well? Yes. Is it a legitimate project? Yes, is what I would say. You are most likely aware of Jerome Powell Fed building 2.5 billion fraud case. Of course, I am. The 100% I'm aware of the essentially $2.5 billion fraud case regarding Jerome Powell. And we discussed that yesterday and the day before on this live as well, essentially two episodes ago. We discussed that regarding $2.5 billion fraud, which the Justice Department right now is investigating into. And the person in charge of that case is Anna. Rep Anna is in charge of that case right now. But yeah, of course I know. What is going on with Circle? It was downgraded to a sell by One Services today. Anything there? Great question, Scott. So today, a essentially analytics company did come out and essentially downgrade Circle to a sell position. The reason why essentially they said Circle, and they put Circle in the sell position category from the analytics firm, it's because they essentially saw Circle in a very competitive market space, especially now that we have the Genius Act passed. They said that other essentially projects out there, stablecoin projects, will be competing for the #1 crown. And in their eyes, same way as essentially JP Morgan's eyes, when they downgraded essentially Circle and they lost interest and essentially said that they don't really see Circle being the dominant position going forward, and essentially they saw CBDCs being the dominant essentially role, is what JP Morgan said themselves. And you fast forward to today, essentially JP Morgan said that last week, and then you fast forward to today, essentially, this company downgrading Circle into a sell position is because they don't see Circle being the #1 stablecoin inside a very competitive, essentially inside of a very competitive market space. They don't see USDC running the show in any sort of a way. So if they don't see USDC running the show, they don't see Circle running the show either. That's why they put Circle in a sell position. In fact, they actually talked about essentially their competitors, which were essentially RLUSD. And even though USDC has an edge, essentially, in terms of how much is raised so far in terms of market cap as a stablecoin compared to RLUSD, they still see RLUSD being a massive competitor to essentially USDC, even though USDC is way above essentially RLUSD in terms of the amount of money that's circulated within it. They still saw RLUSD as a massive competitor to USDC, which just shows that maybe Circle isn't as strong as it's supposed to be. I said this a long time ago. I said there's two issues with the other two stablecoins, which is USDT struggles with transparency and USDC depegged once. You can put it to the excuse of it was the Silicon Valley situation with FTX, essentially. You can put it to that excuse if you want, but that's still bad. USDC depegging once was a bad scenario. USDT still till this day not being transparent is a bigger issue. And then you have RLUSD, who is transparent, who we know who's backing it essentially is Ripple. They're applied for licenses. They have many licenses worldwide. It's just Ripple has an edge over essentially Circle. And even this analytics firm knows that Ripple has an edge over Circle with essentially RLUSD inside the stablecoin market, essentially market space, especially now the Genius Act has passed. So they don't see Circle in any sort of a way as a massive competitor in the stablecoin space. That's why they downgraded essentially today for a sell position. If anybody didn't know that, now they know. And one major analytics firm came out today and put Circle in a sell position. They didn't see it as a major competitor in stablecoins whatsoever. And they mentioned on the lines of RLUSD being a competitor to Circle. And other tokens will probably take the rankings as well. Now, Miles, knowing essentially share the live. Let's go Scott, let's go Mike. Miles, knowing essentially the banks / governments, that's got to be some way that they can manipulate or control the blockchain. So when you draw money out of your own wallet, you'll get a heavily charged for tax. Could this be done? Great question. So Adi says, Miles, knowing the banks and the governments of what he's referring to is knowing the banks and governments of how crooked they are, there's got to be some way that they can manipulate or control the blockchain. So when you draw money out of your own wallet, they'll get heavily charged for tax. Essentially, you will get heavily charged for tax. Could this be done? Yes and no. Could essentially governments be able to control certain blockchains? Yes. There's always going to be elements of centralization in a decentralized world we're heading into. There's no such thing as decentralization. Going into a digital world, it's going to be a very controlled world. It's going to be a majority of will be controlled. People who have cryptocurrencies won't be controlled because it's not about controlling everyone. It's about controlling the retail section. The wealthy don't want to control each other. They more likely just want to control us because when you have, there's so much to it. And it all started with the COVID scenario. But on the aspect of could they tax you if you withdraw certain amounts of money? Yes, they could if they wanted to. But that would again, go back to essentially would the XRP ledger allow such a scenario, or would essentially the Bitcoin developers allow such a scenario, or essentially would Solana's allow such a scenario, and so on and so on. If they did, it wouldn't end well for them either. So most likely no is what I would say. But can they do it if they wanted to? Yes, by a lot of pressure they can. But will they do it? No. That will, because they don't need to do that, to be fairly honest, also because they're already controlling you essentially through CBDCs later on anyways. And they're not going to be profiting from the taxing scenarios of these types of blockchains anyways, because they'll tax you standard anyways. So each country will have their own standard tax laws. So they don't really need to tax you the moment you pull your money out. The only one that's going to be controlled heavily is going to be CBDCs. CBDCs will be the ones that's controlling every aspect of your life. And the UK is heading, down a very strict path right now. Also, a lot of people don't know what's happening in the UK. We're going very strict inside the UK right now. Certain things I probably won't be able to see on live either. So, hello, Miles and CMF. Lottie, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Miles, which project has more potential, XDC or ADA? As I have some money to invest. Good question. First of all, I just want to say, not financial advice in any sort of a way, but in my perspective, what project is better, XDC or ADA? XDC. Definitely XDC. XDC also hasn't done its, well, to be fair, neither has Cardano. It's burst. Essentially, XRP had a somewhat of a burst. Certain crypto projects also. XLM still needs to do some movements as well. But out of those two, XDC is better. Cardano is still good project, is what I would say. Miles, last night I asked you, when we were in the topic, but the comment section disappeared. Yeah, last night, yesterday when we were doing this live, so we had some situations with essentially the comment section disappeared for some odd reasons. But today we don't have that issue, which is great. As I said, I don't think we'll have that issue too. But anyways, put that to one side. Miles, last night I asked you when you were in the topic, but the comment section disappeared. Do you think to move out of UK for a period of time or longer, as we know for UK's instabilities? Do I think it's a good idea to move out of the UK? Do you think it's a good idea to move out of the UK for a period of time, or longer? Yes. You know, in my point of view, I don't think. I mean, already 10,400 millionaires have left the UK due to tax essentially laws and how strict the UK is becoming and how unsafe it's becoming at the same time. Look, I get the idea that the UK might have high taxes if they kept their citizens safe. But because the UK government doesn't keep their citizens safe and increases taxes, well, that's just ridiculous, which means, you know, I fully understand why those millionaires decide to leave the UK. You can't charge high taxes and keep the country unsafe. That's just stupid. That's why it's never going to work. But to be fair, any government we choose, it's all the same, you know, same. Do you know when they say same S, different day? But is it a good idea to move out of the UK? In my point of view, yes. You know, if you can reach a certain amount in life, you can, if you think, you know, you're stable and you can move to another country, go for it. Honestly, go for it. There's no point staying in this country anymore. A lot of people are leaving the UK. There's many reasons of why people are leaving the UK, and it makes a lot of sense, honestly. The country is unsafe. The country is heavily taxed. Our roads are never getting fixed. They focus more on people coming into the country than the people that already live here. They couldn't care less about us. So why not? Honestly, if you want to leave your own countries to go to a better place, go for it. Now, Miles, last night, also that was based on your question. Do I think it's a good idea to leave? Sure, 100%. Hi, Miles. I've heard XRP can be $1,000 by January. Is this true? Johnny, consider variable change. Miles, November 22nd, 2025, ISO 222 changes take effect throughout the banking system. How will that affect things? Okay, so the topic of ISO always comes up inside the crypto space of, you know, how, you know, if a switch flip happens, then the crypto space will take off like this, like it's essentially Wolf of Wall Street. It's not really true in that sense. For the crypto space, certain projects, for example, you know, like XRP or XLM, XDC, and so on, in the financial sector, for those projects to be able to take off, they need certain licensings, not a flip of a switch. They need certain licensings to be able to operate under that manner. So, you know, Ripple, for example, applying for this banking charter license and a Fed master account is what's going to get XRP into the financial sector. It's what's going to get the XRP ledger embedded inside the financial sector. Not more of essentially the ISO 222 flip happening. It's more in the sense of they need certain licenses to be able to operate. Once they get those licenses, then they will be able to embed themselves within the financial sector to expand upon that, is what I would say. So hope that helps. We've got ISO situations. But now also on the other topic of essentially our crypto projects, ISO projects, yes and no. So technically, no crypto, as I've said previously before, a long time ago, technically no crypto project is under the ISO list, but certain crypto projects can become compliant under the ISO list, is what I would say. So regarding the ISO crypto list, it's a yes and no type of scenario. Technically, no crypto project, as I said a long time ago, is on the list. However, certain crypto projects can become compliant. Like XRP can become compliant on the ISO essentially ruling structure. So can essentially XLM, so can XDC, so can certain other crypto projects out there. They can become compliant under those laws. They can also become compliant under the securities factors as well, regarding the ISO 272, if I'm not mistaken, 77. They can also become compliant on that, on the security structures down the line. But yeah, hope that helps. Miles, yes, I read that one already. Miles, any Japan crypto news? Not that. The only Japan crypto news that's been coming out so far is MetaPlanet, who's the equivalent of MicroStrategy, who operates in the Japanese essentially markets, stock market, who has been buying a certain amount of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin more or less, and they're also buying out a crypto bank. The last time we heard about them, I don't know if their deal went through, but we'll probably get some news in the coming days of essentially is MetaPlanet was able to buy that bank. Congratulations, Miles, on episode 339. Let's go CMF. Let's go Scott. Heard about MNEE? No, I haven't, I'll be honest. RLUSD. Let's go Ian. CMF, the best family online. Let's go Scott. Absolutely facts. I can't wait until XRP Millionaires Gathering. Let's go. England ladies through 2-1 win. Miles, any information on the tax situation of cryptos in the US? I haven't heard much. If I take profits, will that be taxed? Well, regarding taxing essentially laws inside the US in particular, we do know that it's going to be essentially tax-free is what they're saying if it's essentially American crypto projects. Now, is it essentially, within that, the law hasn't been still established regarding essentially taxing structures in any sort of a way. We know for a fact that the IRS has access to essentially, they can have access to your Coinbase accounts, for example, and so on if they wanted to. But regarding tax or essentially actual tax structures, we don't have any yet. But it does seem more or less that Trump is going to make it tax-free, is what I would say, regarding American crypto projects, which will essentially open doors to more crypto projects coming back into the US to bring innovation with them. Now, Ronnie, why did you mean the UK is going down a strict path? Please, Miles. Ronnie, he means comedy style. Yeah, exactly what Dee said. There's a lot of things happening in the UK right now. And I'll be honest, the UK is getting closer and closer to a CBDC world than most people realize. Miles, why slow movement of crypto? It makes me losing believing in it. Ronnie, don't lose faith inside the crypto. We just entered rules and regulations, Ronnie. A lot of good things are on the way. Thanks, Miles. No problem. Anytime. MNEE money is a stable coin on the BSV network. Well, I'm not very familiar essentially with the BSV network, to be fairly honest. How long are your lives, Miles? And hours? 1 hour and a half is what I would say. Or sometimes 1 hour and 40 minutes, 1 hour and 50 minutes. It does go for a bit long. When we see high price XRP and case over, I need to show my mom I am so. Let's go, John. I am something. Let's go, Johnny. You definitely will. Do you know about, or have you got any views on Noodle? This low cap seems very interesting. I don't have any perspectives on Noodle, to be fairly honest. I can take a look into it for you and get back to you. No problem, Adi. Adi, just send me a direct message. I'll take a look into it and get back to you. No problem. I had a dream about CBDC lifestyle. You got a new watch, Miles. Looks excellent. Thank you so much, Woodhouse. Yeah, bro, I got a new Omega. The core of, big fan of Omega mainly because I'm a big fan of James Bond movies as a child. The core of communism is a central bank. CBDC fits like a glove. Facts, D. Let's go. Now, Western Union ventures into stablecoins for digital wallets. Western Union, led by CEO essentially Devon, announces today that it has plans to integrate stablecoins into its digital wallet services, aiming to leverage USD-backed coins like USDC and USDT. The move by Western Union to incorporate stablecoins signifies a shift in the financial landscape, enabling essentially broader accessibility and efficiency in digital transactions. Western Union's essentially entrance into the stablecoin sector is driven by CEO Devon, who focuses on opportunities in digital finance. The initiative aims to essentially and USD-pegged stablecoins like USDC and USDT, enhancing their digital offer, essentially digital wallet offerings. The partnerships, essentially the company's partnership strategy, involves collaborations with major crypto firms to establish stablecoin conversion and services. Initial tests are also planned in Africa and South America, and two regions known for high remittance needs, presenting a broad market opening. We see stablecoins really as an opportunity, not as a threat. We're 175 essentially years old, and we're moving innovative across those 175 years, and stablecoins is just yet one more opportunity to innovate within, said essentially Devon. The integration essentially impacts the financial services industry by fostering increased stablecoin transactions and essentially the adoption rates, and this development potentially accelerates blockchain-based solutions in the underbanked regions, essentially boosting both tech adoption and service efficiency. Analysts predict that Western Union's stablecoin adoption could essentially lead to increased on-chain activity, especially on essentially Ethereum's chain, giving its established role as a settlement layer for major stablecoins. Historical trends will also suggest potential benefits for blockchain networks and protocols centered around stablecoin essentially utilities. So Western Union is about to enter the crypto space. They're going to be entering the stablecoin space, since that now we have the Genius Act, which is again going to be bringing quite a lot of liquidity to the crypto space. All brilliant to see. Thailand is what we're going to talk about next. Thailand is nearing essentially a deal with the US to lower a 36% export tariff before August 1st. It's good to see that more countries are doing essentially a deal with the US regarding tariffs, so that essentially we could put tariffs to the side and move forward. Thailand is essentially very close to making some sort of a deal. So here it is. Thailand is very close to forming a trade pact with Washington, D.C. to reduce the upcoming 36% tariff on the nation's exports before it takes effect on August 1st. According to Pichi, the Thailand's finance minister, the minister told reporters that his team will submit final clarifications and a proposal to trade officials with Washington within days. He added that Bangkok has already provided nearly all the information that Washington essentially requested and expects a deal before the 36% tariff is imposed. He said that Thailand will swiftly complete essentially their talks. We have completed more than 90% of our negotiations. Today, or essentially tomorrow, should be the very final stretch. There's just a little bit left, said Pichi. He also noted that the US's officials have still sent over additional questions that need to review, ensure the package is fully complete. Pichi said Thailand hopes to secure a tariff rate like the ones essentially guaranteed to neighboring countries. Earlier agreements saw Vietnamese goods face a 20% tariff and Indonesian essentially products set at 19%. To soften the impacts of tariffs on its economy, which depends essentially heavily on exports and has growing more slowly than its neighbors in recent years, Thailand has improved its offerings. The US used to be the country's top exporter market in 2024, accounting for 18% essentially of total shipments, and officials want to limit any harm to that trade. Thailand said it will sharply boost its imports of American goods that needs essentially at home farming goods products, Boeing aircrafts, and LNG. This pledge looks to reduce its trade surplus for essentially $46 billion last year and the balance trade between the two countries. So the US sells essentially US products to Thailand. Thailand essentially sends their products to the US, which is how a trade deal should work. Trump is doing a good job at putting American citizens first, even though CNN won't tell you that. Bangkok has also promised more US investments, including support for the Alaskan gas project backed by President Donald Trump. The government expanded its zero tariff list for US products to cover 90% essentially of items, an increase from just 60 essentially percent, the Thai Chamber of Commerce clarified. So Thai government is going to be investing into essentially even US gas products and so on. So this is great investments that are coming into the US. Again, CNN won't tell you that. That chamber was essentially, which advises the finance minister, already estimates that new measures could cut the surplus by 70% within 3 years and bring trade roughly into balance within the next 5 years. When asked whether Washington and essentially pressed for new essentially situations after last week's meeting, Pichi said the US officials have outlined and set essentially a policy of expectations rather than fresh demands. that the Thai side is now reviewing these guidelines to see if they can be fully met. Thailand faces challenges at home with the weak consumer spending and the highest household debt in the region. A favorable result in the tariff talks would help calm investors' worries in time of political uncertainty, especially after the Prime Minister, essentially, of Thailand's suspension due to alleged misconduct by the court in handling the Cambodian border, essentially, disputes. And in the Q1 of 2025, Thailand's exports rose about 15%, driven by early shipments during the 90-day pause in tariffs. So honestly, there was a lot of countries right now desperate to sell to the US. Even again, CNN will tell you otherwise, that nobody wants to invest in the US and everybody's going to start investing in China. That's not the reality of it. Everybody's begging to invest with the US because they're starting to realize that, they really didn't have any leverage to start with going up against Trump and the United States. Now, JP Morgan is what we're going to talk about next. JP Morgan explores crypto-backed loan ventures. So JP Morgan, since the Genius Act has been passed, has started moving on to different ventures. It almost seems like JP Morgan has started to realize that they're losing the battle against companies like Ripple, for example, or Circle, or essentially Coinbase and Kraken, when they're applying to essentially be in their field with their banking charter license and their Fed master accounts. And since the Genius Act has been passed, JP Morgan's been acting quite a bit weird, you could pretty much say. First talking about how they're moving on from stablecoins after the Genius Act was passed to essentially tokenized banknotes. Now they're talking about offering crypto loans. They're trying to become, down the line, if they want to survive. Believe me, a lot of people will think JP Morgan won't collapse. Everybody thought Nokia wouldn't collapse. To be fairly honest, there was a lot of companies down the line where people thought, nah, it's never going to collapse. It's too big to fail. And those companies all failed one by one like a domino effect. So, certain banks, if they want to be able to operate, they have to turn into fintech companies, is what essentially JP Morgan's turning into. So here it is. JP Morgan Chase is exploring offering loans and secured with cryptocurrencies, such as starting essentially with Bitcoin and Ethereum, aiming to tap into institutional demand, as reported by the Financial Times. By the way, this is a bank that hated cryptocurrencies and called them Ponzi schemes. Now it seems like they're all inside the crypto space because they realized they've lost that battle. But the traditional bank had the loudest voice inside the financial sector. Slowly, day by day, the traditional banks are losing their voice to fintech companies that's going to be replacing them. This initiative is significant as it marks a shift towards accepting cryptocurrency assets as loans and collaterals, potentially enhancing their legitimacy with traditional financial systems. JP Morgan Chase is set to venture into crypto-backed, essentially lending, a plan aimed at primarily at high net worth and institutional clients first. Jamie Dimon, the CEO, has previously shown skepticism towards Bitcoin, but acknowledges the strategic value of exploring stablecoins and other cryptocurrencies out there. Reports indicate that the bank's digital assets and risk management teams are involved in the initiative, which is still under terminal's internal review. JP Morgan is also developing infrastructure for a crypto collateralized loans focusing on Bitcoin and Ethereum as essentially initial collateral essentially options. When the world's largest bank recognizes crypto's value as a loan backing, we're witnessing the bridging between TradeFi, essentially traditional finance, and digital assets. JP Morgan's move could significantly impact the institutional crypto adoption in essentially the United States. The development essentially aligns with the evolving regulatory landscape following the Clarity Act, encouraging broader adoption of digital assets by traditional banks. Previous instances in fintechs and essentially banking, such as those by BlockFi and Celsius, demonstrates the use cases and viabilities of crypto-backed loans. If successful by JP Morgan, it may set a precedent for other traditional financial institutions to follow in suit. Potential essentially outcomes of JP Morgan's initiative include wider financial acceptance of crypto assets and pressure on regulators to further define crypto asset banking and frameworks. The banking interest essentially may also enhance liquidity for certain crypto projects. So essentially, JP Morgan, one of the biggest haters of the crypto space, also one of the biggest haters of Bitcoin, now getting to a stage where they're essentially offering crypto loans. It's the only way JP Morgan sees themselves surviving. JP Morgan has no choice but to adapt to essentially the crypto space now that laws are passing one by one. It's also going to send now essentially a radar to other banks around it that, they should also be slowly offering crypto services, otherwise they'll get left behind. And, this is what I'm saying. I love to see more and more every day the traditional financial space connecting to the crypto space, because we're about to get a flood of liquidity happening, which I would love to see. And so would everybody else inside the crypto space, to be fairly honest. Now, Coinbase is what we're going to talk about next. Coinbase opens CFTC regulated prep, essentially futures to US traders. Futures trading is coming to the United States through Coinbase, because now, the Clarity Act and the Stablecoin, the Genius Act, and the other acts that will be passing, and the market structure, which we talked about earlier on, essentially on this live. So Coinbase has officially launched a CFTC regulated, essentially, futures for US traders through its Coinbase Financial Markets platform. This development marks the first time American investors can access these derivatives in a fully regulated environment. As of today, the company has joined expanding list of exchanges offering regulated derivatives in the US market space. Bringing the power and the efficiency of futures to a regulated American market is a huge step forward for the US crypto traders, said the company on their announcement today. Coinbase explained in a separate blog post that futures, essentially, contracts account for roughly 90% of the global crypto derivatives volume. However, until now, the US access has been limited by a complex regulatory landscape, but no longer. The contracts are already live, with the initial essentially offering including Nano Bitcoin and Nano Ethereum futures. These are essentially fractional contracts that give traders exposure to their respective assets at a lower capital requirements. Each contract represents a small portion of the underlying cryptocurrency and supports up to 10x in-trade essentially leverage, no monthly expiration dates, and trading fees are as low as 0.02%. These products are available through CFM, a CFTC regulated entity, and are designed especially for US users. Unlike traditional futures, the futures contracts have a 5-year duration that allows traders to hold positions longer without the need for monthly rollovers. Additionally, they can also access up to 20x intraday day leverages on metal futures such as gold and silver also. And meanwhile, the exchanges also rebranded its Coinbase wallet to BaseApp, the new platform that brings together crypto social features and payments and mini apps, all powered by essentially the Base network, which we essentially revealed 2 nights ago on this live. But this service is essentially, what Coinbase is offering right now, futures contracts. It's great because, again, it's just more liquidity entering the crypto space. 90% of derivatives markets for crypto space, the funding that's coming in from futures contracts. Now a regulated market space where traders from the retail section can enter and essentially do futures. Brilliant. Honestly, brilliant. Well done, Coinbase. Now, 5 ETFs on the CBO amend their filings for the SEC engagements. So 5 ETFs listed on the CBO, Chicago essentially exchange, have submitted amended files to the SEC, as reported by James at Bloomberg, indicating active regulatory engagements and adjustments and discussions. James is very big. He's a very big ETF specialist analyst from Bloomberg. The amendments aim to essentially introduce an in-kind creation and redemption mechanism which could advance market efficiency and liquidity. James, essentially research analyst at Bloomberg, noted in a recent article that the 5 ETFs recently amended their filings with the SEC. This change highlights a proactive dialogue between the Chicago Exchange listed funds and the regulatory agencies. The potential introduction of an in-kind essentially creation and redemption mechanism is under consideration. The mechanism will only affect after institutional players like market makers and authorized participants, while retail investors remain unaffected regarding direct exchanges. The development could enhance how ETFs mirror underlying price movements. Industry sources also suggest that the improved arbitrary efficiencies from essentially this proposal might boost liquidity and benefiting the broader crypto market space. The SEC approach to ETF creations and redemption mechanisms is essentially an ongoing issue in engagements and points towards regulatory comfort with in-kind essentially in-market infrastructure matures. Research team essentially points that this amendment could reduce tracking errors between ETF shares and underlying prices, potentially also essentially enhancing market efficiency. As the proposal targets institutional players, the ripple effect might usher in tighter trading spreads, reflecting on crypto markets, more stable valuation and frameworks. amazing, honestly, to see. Again, more liquidity entering the crypto space. What we're going to be talking about next is Michael Saylor. But before we talk about Michael Saylor, let's go inside the comment section first, and then we go straight into the Michael Saylor and the White House news. Quite a big one there. Let's see where we're at inside the comment section. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you have any comments or questions or statements to make, put it down inside the comment section. More than happy to answer any questions you may have. So let's see where we're at. We were at here. I've been thinking about it a bit too much, even at work today, doing gardening. All the properties I work are rented. It's getting realistic. Can you elaborate, please, on BXE? Ian, send me a message. I'll take a look and to give you a better perspective on it. There is also a feature on my banking app which looks like an expiry date. It's not, but it's presented like it is. Interesting. Hopefully, my crypto will be enough soon for me to get out of the UK before all of this happens. So much to look forward to. Let's go with those. Solar eclipse on August 2nd. Okay. Johnny says, Miles, what is good amount of XRP? Like if someone has 1,000 XRP, how long will she have to wait before we can see return realistic time frame? 1,000 XRP, in my point of view, it's a great amount of XRP to have. You know, if somebody's out there telling you need to have, you know, essentially 100,000 or 50,000 XRP, so on, yes, obviously the more you have, the better it is. But however, even having 100 XRP could be life-changing depending on how long you essentially hold it onto. Giving you exact time frame of essentially when you have 1,000 XRP at this particular time and date, you're going to be extremely successful is ridiculous for me to even point out. But me saying essentially you having 1,000 XRP, you have a bright future ahead of yourself, I can say that and also say not financial advice. But 1,000 XRP is a great amount to have inside your wallet. Thanks again, Miles. Got to go. All the best. Let's go, D. No problem. Good to see you. See you tomorrow, sometimes usual. Hi, Miles. How will I know when is the best time to take some profits during the bull run? Well, I could tell you that, no problem. And I've always said, essentially, when your crypto projects reach essentially certain price targets, for example, breaking their old price targets, that will be a good time to take out some profits if you want to. As I said, it's never a bad idea to take out profits if you want to, but I will also, you know, along the way say to you, you know, you can take out profits now, for example, and so on and so on. But it's way too soon for profit taking right now because we've just entered regulations. You know, we're tiptoeing right now into regulations. What's going to happen next is going to be absolutely ballistic. Morning, Miles and CMF. Shelly, good to see you as well. Good to see how you're doing, how you've been, Shelly. Now, Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor's Bitcoin strategy unveiled at the White House Crypto Summit. So there's a White House Crypto Summit going on right now, which we're also going to get a report from on, you know, the roadmap of where we're heading towards. So apparently this is what's happening. In a significant move, Michael Saylor, executive chairman of strategy, outlined an ambitious Bitcoin strategy at the White House Crypto Summit, proposing an economic growth and new market risk. The event's significance lies in a potential to transform how Bitcoin affects the economy, while immediate market reactions indicate both opportunities had heightened risk. Saylor, known for his leadership at Strategy, formerly MicroStrategy, unveiled a broad strategy emphasizing Bitcoin's investments. The plan suggests generating $81 trillion in wealth for the US Treasury by 2045, aligning with his essentially stated goals of economic enhancements and national security. Saylor's company is selling essentially up to $21 billion in preferred stocks to boost Bitcoin reserves, a substantial financial maneuver aligned with corporate trends. Recent announcements highlight increased Bitcoin adoption among public corporations, with over 820,000 Bitcoins held collectively between public companies. Industry analysts, however, caution that this essentially strategy introduces systematic risk related to debt and liquidity, reflecting growing concerns about potential sell-offs, which it does. Because if too many public companies are coming forward and holding on to Bitcoin, it's going to cause a massive disruption. I don't know, maybe when somebody by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto decides to sell. So if somebody like Satoshi Nakamoto, or if it's a group or an entity or a government, nobody knows, decides to sell those wallets that hold roughly about 1.1 million Bitcoins, it could cause a massive ripple effect and put a lot of pressure on companies essentially like MicroStrategy, who hold essentially a tremendous amount of Bitcoin. It could put a lot of pressure on a Japanese company like Metaplanet. It could put pressure on BlackRock. It could put pressure on a lot of companies out there around the world if somebody as essentially as big as him decides to sell his Bitcoin. I'll be very honest, as some people might say, no, it won't do anything. For example, if the main man Satoshi Nakamoto decides to sell his Bitcoins one day somewhere down the line, essentially, even if he is alive or isn't alive, or it's a company or it's a group of people or it's a government entity, if he essentially sells his Bitcoins, nothing will happen. Michael Saylor will just buy it back up again. You've got to understand the amount of Bitcoin he may have, for as we know what his wallets are. If he does sell, it's going to cause a massive ripple effect. I'll give you an example. Germany, for example, selling tremendous amount of Bitcoin causes a ripple effect. A company like MicroStrategy could sell off essentially 50 million worth of Bitcoin. Just to say 50 million, not even 100 million or essentially 1 billion worth of Bitcoin. Let's just say a company like MicroStrategy just sells off 50 million worth of Bitcoin. It will cause red alarms across the entire stock market in terms of Bitcoin ETFs and everybody holding onto the Bitcoin. It will cause a massive ripple effect of people panic selling. Why is MicroStrategy selling Bitcoin? Who cares? Just sell, is what will happen. So imagine like somebody like Satoshi Nakamoto starts essentially selling his massive wallets. It will cause a massive wave of financial difficulty, is what will happen essentially. So I understand fully when essentially certain analysts from major firms out of Wall Street or essentially anywhere else come out and say things like, too many public companies are holding on to the same asset that we don't know who created or who's behind it. It could be a foreign government agency that created Bitcoin. There's always been hints of maybe, just maybe, there are certain Asian countries behind that crypto project, but we don't know. So we don't know what the agenda behind it is. So it's a bit odd, And also, a lot of public companies are creating Bitcoin portfolios just to boost their share prices, their market share prices, for example. For example, a study came out that certain companies, public companies that are doing incredibly bad on the stock market, decide to make announcements of they're creating a Bitcoin treasury to boost their stock prices. This is exactly what essentially Metaplanet did. Metaplanet was a failing essentially company that was on the borderline of essentially giving up and closing up shop. One day they decided to make the announcement of becoming a Bitcoin essentially company, just like MicroStrategy. Their stocks shot up through the roof, and now they're going to be buying a bank. Just to put that in perspective, they went from failing as a company in the stock market, Japanese stock market, to now having so much profits to be able to afford to buy a digital bank. So a lot of public companies are following that exact same footsteps. And let's not forget the borrowing situation that's going on regarding all of these public companies that are borrowing against their stocks or using their own stocks as collateral or printing too many stocks, you could even say, to buy Bitcoin. It's like it's being held together by sellotape by public companies. It's like, honestly, Bitcoin is being held together by sellotape or blue tack by public companies. And if any of those sellotapes or blue tacks peel off or essentially fall off, then it just opens a floodgate of selling pressure. Let's just hope whenever that does happen that we're so deep into regulations that decoupling happened a very long time ago. This is why I'm saying that we needed regulations, which we got, and we need decoupling to happen, which we're getting. This is why we need decoupling to happen. This is why we need XRP, XLM, XDC, Cardano, Ethereum, Solana, AVAX, all of these crypto projects that decouple from Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin does become this massive hazard, it doesn't really matter anymore because all these crypto projects have decoupled on the regulations and went on their own separate paths due to utility. Now Bitcoin is just standing by itself. And if a hazard situation happens, who cares? Now, the immediate consequences of Saylor's strategy is increased speculation about the health of Bitcoin's markets. Analysts underscores the forced Bitcoin sales could essentially create a lot of market volatility. The proposal implementations extend beyond financial considerations, encompassing political and business aspects as well. Historically, corporate adoption of Bitcoin during market downtrends has led to liquidation events, also strengthening arguments and for diversified treasury strategies. While Saylor continues to champion Bitcoin, historical data caution against resilience on single asset holdings. It's always been the rule of Wall Street. The number one rule Wall Street lived on, breathed on, slept on is don't hold your eggs in one basket. It was the number one rule in Wall Street. Don't hold all of your eggs in one basket because that's just a recipe for failure. It's a guaranteed recipe for failure when you hold all of your eggs under one basket. And well, not guaranteed. Let's just say 99.9% essential recipe for failure. But a strong forward-thinking essentially strategy will unlock trillions in economic value, strengthen national security, and position the US as the undisputed leader essentially of digital age, said Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor is saying that the US should only be focused on Bitcoin. If Bitcoin backfires and the US is holding a massive wallet of Bitcoin, what do you think is going to happen to the US economy? It's going to get better. It already has a massive debt. It will just get much more bigger. So honestly, holding all of your eggs in one basket, especially on a crypto project, and again, no, not throwing any shade towards Bitcoin whatsoever, but the issue is when you try to state facts about certain crypto projects or certain companies or certain things, some people get offended, as if I'm talking about their family members. It's just a token. When it comes to Bitcoin, we've got to understand that we still don't know who's behind it. We still don't know what that person or that group or that entity's intentions are with Bitcoin. Yes, there is a white paper, and yes, he says it's about the creation of essentially this liberation of getting away from the financial sector and so on. But can we believe is the other scenario? We can't just take everything as gospel in life, especially in a very crooked life. Not crooked life, but crooked world. So that's just, you can't just take anything off face value, is what I'm trying to say. So we still don't know what the exact tensions essentially of the founder of Bitcoin is, or the group behind Bitcoin, or essentially the government entity behind Bitcoin, because we don't know who still created it. And the timing was quite interesting as well. 2008, biggest market collapse happens. 2009 comes hanging along Bitcoin. Things don't add up sometimes. Nothing in this world involving huge amounts of money happens by accident, honestly. Nothing in this world happens by accident. If you think anything in this world just happens by accident, then you must be born yesterday. Because 2008, biggest market crash America's ever had, one of the biggest market crashes America's ever possibly had to date, which affects the rest of the world's market space. And then next year comes Bitcoin. And we're supposed to believe that's not coordinated, just a coincidence. Biggest market crash in history. Next year comes new token to save the essentially market space, which ironically has also become the institutional token. Nothing in this world happens by accident. Nothing. Involving money, huge amounts of money, not an accident, coordinated. So we still don't know what the intentions were to start off with Bitcoin. Yes, there's a white paper left behind, but you can't take anything in this world face value, especially from a man or a group. We don't know who the hell he is or what he looks like. And people throw shade on a company like Ripple or Cardano's Foundation or Solana's Foundation, or at least we know who they are. Not much can be said for the other ones. Now, before we go for the next news, which is regarding, because honestly, if people are out there thinking it's a coincidence, Bitcoin comes in, saves the day after the 2008 crash, you must be born yesterday. If you think anything in this world happens by accident. Now, this is why, when they say too many public companies holding Bitcoin might backfire really bad. Knowing that you don't know who's behind it. And the only thing that we have left is a white paper, as if I'm going to believe some random person I've never seen my entire lifetime, or a group of people that I've never seen my entire lifetime, or if it's a government entity, just because they left behind some piece of paper, I'm supposed to read it and go, ooh, yes, I believe whatever he said on this piece of paper. 100% I believe this man. I don't believe anyone that doesn't show their face and writes a piece of paper and goes, here. Now, many thanks, essentially, Miles, for your coincidence for in-depth crypto news and facts. Let's go, Ian. Have you seen anything about the UK selling loads of Bitcoin soon, Miles? Yes, I shared the news essentially 2 nights ago on the UK selling a certain amount of Bitcoin. I said, either they're going to follow Germany's footsteps or they're going to follow the US's footsteps in creating regulations. Michael Saylor has to sell eventually. He is borrowing money to buy BTC. Yes or no? He is. That's true. Happy Vices. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Facts, Miles. Let's go, Ian. He can't show his wallet because he's really selling when he tells others to buy so he can cover his deadlines. Why don't we hear much from the CEO of Bitcoin, Corbin? Good point. There's no such thing as a coincidence. Facts. Let's go autistic. Miles is cooking that good stuff tonight, though. All facts. Let's go, Ray. Now, tokenization, one of the biggest factors inside the crypto space that's going to add quite a lot of liquidity towards the crypto space. Just depends on how you look at it. Seattle warns SEC regarding tokenization, not because they think tokenization is a bad idea, but they know that tokenization is going to be a great idea. They just want the SEC to execute tokenization the right way by not leaving loopholes about. So Seattle warns SEC tokenization must deliver real innovation, not regulatory, essentially, loopholes. So the US Securities Exchange Commission, SEC, plans to streamline securities tokenization. May sound essentially promising, but it is unlikely to benefit investors unless it delivers genuine innovation and efficiency, according to market maker Seattle Securities. Tokenized securities must achieve success by delivering real innovation and efficiency to market participants, rather than through essentially serving regulatory arbitrary. Seattle also wrote in a statement to the SEC's crypto task force, as reported by Bloomberg. Tokenization, the process of representing real-world assets on a blockchain with digital tokens, is often essentially touted for its potential to reduce costs and boost efficiency by minimizing the role of intermediaries, shortening settlement times, and enabling fractional ownership of financial assets. A December report by the World Economic Forum argued that the benefits of tokenization in capital markets will increase as more institutions and infrastructures see the advantages for themselves. What they're referring to regarding institutions and tokenizations is that certain institutions, or all types of institutions, don't need to go to the bank to borrow money to build a big brand new building, shiny building. They can just make it into a tokenization project and get the retail section to fund them the project so they can build their big brand new building. Major players like BlackRock and Franklin Templeton have entered into tokenization race alongside crypto-focused platforms such as Coinbase, Robinhood, and Kraken. SEC Chairman Paul Atkins has advocated for tokenizations, comparing its potential impact to the evolution of audio formats. He has suggested the introduction of an innovation exemption to encourage its development. Despite growing regulatory support, risks remain. Seattle cautioned that asset tokenization could siphon liquidity from traditional stock markets and create new liquidity pools that will be inaccessible to key institutional investors such as pension banks and endowers. Now, Seattle isn't essentially alone in sounding the alarm on this about challenges in traditional financial institutions face when entering digital asset space. JP Morgan made essentially headlines aimed at reports that is exploring Bitcoin-backed loans, which we essentially talked about a little bit earlier on tonight's live. This essentially move marks a significant shift from JP Morgan's historical movements inside the crypto space. The biggest hurdle he noted includes secure custody collateral volatility and essentially orderly liquidation frameworks. Bitcoin-backed lending isn't just about holding assets, it's about what happens when the market moves fast, ensuring clients know exactly how their Bitcoin is being managed at all times, said Reitz. Additional essentially challenges such as a safe essentially custody, or essentially also top of the essentially mind for institutions. In the Circuit CEO, Harry said he developed a crypto recovery engine to address this very issue. This is obviously the situation they're trying to fix. But JP Morgan going to tokenization, that's the only way they're seeing themselves survive, becoming a fintech company somewhere down the line for JP Morgan. Otherwise, they're going to survive. Doesn't matter how big you are, if you don't adapt to the new financial sector that's about to be coming around, you will collapse over time. But talking about what Seattle said, essentially regarding tokenization, yes, it's the biggest factor coming to play by a mile. And tokenization is definitely going to be changing the game, especially for institutions if they ever want to get funding. Think of tokenizations as GoFundMe for institutions. When institutions want to build something brand new, like a big building, they would have to go to a bank to borrow money to build that building and obviously pay it off. Now, if a particular institution decides to do a tokenization project instead, they can get money from the retail section. So tokenization, the simplest way to put it, is like a GoFundMe for institutions if they want to, because they get funding for certain things to build. Now, in return, those institutions will give you something in return. It could be essentially a percentage on your earnings of tokenization, or essentially certain perks within that building, whatever they're building. It could be a hotel, it could be a bar in a hotel, it could be whatever. They could give you certain perks, and they could give you essentially something on top on a monthly basis, like a yield or staking situations and so on. So obviously you will get some benefits as well. And sometimes you might not get any benefits at all regarding the Hilton Hotel situation. But tokenization, honestly, the simplest way to put it is like a GoFundMe for institutions. But tokenization obviously has other aspects as well. You can tokenize essentially your own property. If you own properties, you can tokenize it. You can bring them on the blockchain. Tokenization is also great for borrowing as a retail member or as a business. If you want to borrow against your assets, because your assets are already tokenized on the blockchain, it's much more transparent, it's much more quicker to get access to 24/7 essentially loans, no matter where you are around the world. So there's lots of great features about tokenization also. Now, Bank of England is what we're going to talk about next. Bank of England reconsiders a digital pound plan as focus shifts to stablecoins and CBDCs. So the Bank of England, for the longest time, said they're not interested in CBDCs. And then they said they're researching CBDCs. And then they said they're not sure, but they're still going to research CBDCs. And then they said we're not doing CBDCs, but still continuing research on CBDCs, which makes no sense. Why would you continue doing something, spending billions of pounds looking into it, if you're not going to execute it? Which meant they were going to execute it, but they just don't know how to tell the retail section in the UK that we're going towards CBDCs. Now, you fast forward to today, where this comes out. The Bank of England is re-evaluating its plans to launch a digital pound, aimed shifting priorities towards stablecoins and tokenized bank deposits, according to people familiar with the matter. Also, they're going more towards CBDCs. Bloomberg reported that the Bank of England is urging commercial banks to redirect their efforts away, essentially, from certain products. Now, in this case, they're saying CBDCs, but a little bit later on, they're saying they're going more into CBDCs. It's like they're trying to put you off the scent of CBDCs, but yet still bringing in CBDCs. And instead develop payment innovations that can deliver similar benefits to customers. This change essentially in stance comes even though Digital Pound project remains in its design phase, with a final decision yet to be made. The Digital Pound is pretty much at its final stage right now, even though the Bank of England says we're not interested in CBDCs. Then why create a digital pound, spend billions of pounds on it, while still saying we're not interested, but yet still creating it? Governor Andrew Bailey has publicly expressed doubts about the necessities of issuing a retail CBDC, yet he still is investing money on creating one, stating essentially in June that he remains unconvinced we need to create new forms of money. Instead, he emphasized that banks should prioritize developing tokenized deposits, which some experts see as more stable way to bridge traditional and decentralized finance. Bailey, however, maintains support for wholesale CBDCs dedicated to listing transactions between financial institutions, but appeared less supportive of introducing one for households regarding retail CBDCs. Again, they're lying to you when they say they're more interested in wholesale CBDCs because they care about the retail section's privacy. That's why they're not creating CBDCs for the retail section. It's all one big massive lie. I'll give you an example. If the institutions are doing essentially wholesale CBDC, who's interacting with the institutions in terms of those wholesale? The idea of privacy, first of all, doesn't exist in this world that we live in right now. Let's just put it out there. For example, the UK government has access to essentially won the lawsuit to have access to your essentially Apple iClouds, won the lawsuit to have access to your WhatsApp and essentially Telegram, WhatsApp, and so on. The idea that we have privacy in the world we're living in right now is ludicrous. So them playing, essentially a role of, oh, we care about your privacy going into a digital world. They don't care at all about your privacy going into a digital world. They bring wholesale CBDCs first, so everybody around you accepts CBDCs. Then they'll bring the retail CBDCs so you can use it with those essentially businesses. That's the only reason they're doing the loop around. It's not because they care about your privacy, because if they care about your privacy, they wouldn't be suing WhatsApp to get access to your private messages between your loved ones. They wouldn't be suing Telegram to get access to your private messages and your private phone calls. So honestly, if they cared about privacy, why do suings of essentially finding out what your essentially your retail section is talking about on their social platforms to their family members? So the idea of we care about privacy is absolutely stupid. It's a one big massive lie. We don't have privacy in this world. We never did, and we never will, to be fairly honest, just to put it out there for everybody out there. There are certain ways to get privacy, but the traditional ways that people use in the retail section are not the ways to be private in real life. Now, despite reconsidering essentially CBDC initiatives, the Bank of England not fully embraced stablecoins either. Early this month, Bailey warned against the risk of stablecoin domination, citing their lack of deposits and protection and guarantees typically offered by traditional banks. He essentially noted that stablecoins could pose systematic risk to financial stability and potentially undermine the very nature of money if left unregulated. We are going to have a look at it very closely, essentially, through that lens. It's both a financial stability and a money issue in that sense, he said. The Bank of England's essentially approach contrasts with other jurisdictions that have recently halted their CBDC projects. The United States, under essentially Trump administration, paused the CBDC development over financial stability concerns, while South Korea suspended its digital currency pilot programs earlier this year, just due to because they have some essentially voting happening in South Korea right now, and the US technically is the Fed that can't create CBDCs, but an older alternative entity can. But yeah, and it's not just the UK that's essentially in CBDCs. The US is still in CBDCs. So is the EU. So is every other country around this world. 98% of centralized banks are pretty much into CBDCs. That's essentially stats from the International Monetary Fund themselves and the Bank of International Settlements and the Atlantic reports as well. Now, on the topic of CBDCs, from the MICA to FedNow, how banking licenses unlock global markets for crypto firms is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about that, let's go start a conversation first. Let's see where we're at. And we were at here. He can't show his wallet because it's really selling. We read that one. Okay, we're here. Okay, Miles, I've missed that live. Thanks for the answer. If the UK is smart, it will follow the US. Yep. Harris says, will all happen this year, or do we need to wait 2 years more? Harris, great question. Well, the regulations just come through this year, so it's obviously going to be continuing beyond. The end date is pretty much 2027 regarding how far we are to CBDCs. Some countries obviously are releasing it this year, and some countries next year, and so on, but the end date is still 2027. It's also a date that I shared about 2 years ago as well. And honestly, I'm surprised XRP hasn't hit harder yet when there's so much positive news. True, but there is still a lawsuit going on, and it hasn't got approved for a ETF yet. So there's a lot of things that still need to, not a lot of things, but the biggest one's been regulations, which was great. The case still needs to be dropped for the second, well, that was supposed to be the first green light, but it happened the other way around. We got regulations first. Case needs to drop, one green light, regulations, second green light, which we got, and essentially pretty much after that is utility. But Ripple applying for additional licensing expands its footprint even longer, which is great to see, which ironically is what we're going to talk about now. From the MICA to FedNow, how banking licenses unlock global markets for crypto firms. So, for Ripple, Circle, and Kraken, becoming a bank is a strict move to stay compliant, scale faster, and operate globally. For example, the MICA in Europe. The MICA law enforces strict rules for stablecoin issuers. Issuers must meet capital reserves and transparency standards. A US bank charter paired with a European EMA license helps satisfy most MICA requirements. Do you see where this is going? Ripple applying essentially for a EU, essentially MICA, to become compliant. Ripple's EMI license in Luxembourg going live. Ripple applying for essentially a banking charter license in the US. Everything you need to be compliant in the EU to be able to operate your essentially, to expand your footprint is exactly the steps that Ripple has taken. This step essentially is set up, follows Circle and essentially Ripple to move across like countries like France, Germany, and Spain without repeated national approvals, without banking level compliance to stablecoins risk, usage limits, or exclusion from Eurozone systems. FedNow in the US. FedNow, launched by the Federal Reserve in 2023, enable real-time USD payments 24/7. Access is limited to regulated financial institutions. With a bank license, Ripple or Circle can connect directly to FedNow. Just to repeat that one more time. With a bank license, Ripple or Circle can connect directly to FedNow. Remember the age-old argument of essentially, Fed now and Ripple and XRP coming together? Is it possible? Yes, with a banking license. This would allow fast, reliable redemption of USDC or RRUSD even on weekends. As FedNow adoption grows among US payment providers, unlicensed crypto firms will essentially be left out. This is why I'm saying it's very important to be inside of crypto projects that will do tremendously well under regulations and essentially institutions coming in. You don't want to be positioned inside of crypto projects that institutions and the regulations won't benefit from. The global playbook. In regions like Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East, regulatory pressure is rising. Singapore favors licensed crypto firms with strong internal controls and audit systems. Ripple is massive in Singapore. In fact, Singapore gave out one of their first licensings to a crypto firm was Ripple from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Brazil now requires platforms to safeguard customer funds in approved institutions. Dubai in Abu Dhabi demand proof of solvency and robust compliance to maintain licenses. We know for a fact Ripple also has a license there. They also have a license in Brazil. Holding a US bank license improves credibility in these markets. If US gets a bank license, essentially if Ripple gets a bank license, it means they're pretty much green light to work in the EU, they're green lighted to work in Latin American countries, and they're green lighted to work essentially in Middle Eastern countries. So if Ripple gets the licenses they need from the US, because they already have other licenses around the world, and the ones that they don't have, they have already applied for them, and they will get them as well, which means that essentially Ripple will be able to operate on a legal basis in the EU, which they have through the EMEI license they have through Luxembourg, and they also applying for the MICA license to become more compliant. So Ripple is going to be able to operate in the EU, the Middle East, Latin American countries, and essentially US being the final stop with their bank charter license. Holding a US bank license improves credibility in these markets. Essentially Ripple gets a US banking license, their credibility goes through the roof for any other country they're trying to apply licenses to. The more essentially banking licenses Ripple gets worldwide, the more Ripple is going to be able to embed the XRP ledger into the financial sector. So the flip of the switch, the crypto space has been talking about for the longest time regarding XRP. This is the switch that essentially Ripple getting the banking charter license in the US gives it so much credibility that any other license that they don't have outside of the US in terms of banking, they're going to get it so much more easier. For firms like Kraken, Circle, Ripple, and so on, it opens essentially the doors to offer stablecoin services, custody services, cross-border payment services under trusted oversights. The global market is divided between firms that meet regulatory standards and those that fall behind. Becoming a bank gives crypto companies a clear path to stay on the right side of that divide. Banking has the potential to provide crypto firms with tools that go far beyond licenses. Direct access to financial infrastructure. A banking charter license gives access to Federal Reserve payment rails, enabling faster, more secure settlements without third-party banks. In other words, essentially, green door access to pretty much everything. Stronger stablecoins. Real-time settlements, essentially, and reserve oversights improve stability, reduce risk, and offer a better user experience for assets like USDC and RRUSD. Custody and settlements under one roof. Regulated status allows firms to offer full essentially custody, lending, and compliance services in-house, cutting costs and complexities. Regulatory credibility. A federal charter license strengthens compliance and trust with regulators and institutions, which is key, essentially, as laws like the Genius Act reshape the landscape right now. Institutional onboarding. With a bank license, crypto firms can offer services that meet essentially the standards of traditional finance, helping essentially bridging the gap. Crypto companies are applying for bank licensings to operate as regulated financial institutions with broader capabilities. Global positioning. A US charter paired essentially with the Europeans and regional licenses strengthens the case for emerging markets, and that's what we want, cross-border payments. In other words, emerging markets, cross-border payments. Ripple getting a license essentially in the US, one, gives it credibility, two, having that essential licenses already they do have in Asian countries and Middle Eastern countries, and the ones that they are getting from the EU and the ones that they already have in Luxembourg, opens the doors for Ripple to embed the XRP ledger inside the financial sector. And that's that flip of the switch everybody's been talking about, just didn't know how it's going to be happening. Infrastructure shift. With banking licenses, crypto firms can manage compliance, settlement, and custody directly. This removes their resilience on third-party service providers and gives them their full control over risk, security, and transaction speed. Institutional onboarding. Banks are held essentially to higher standards. Once crypto firms meet those standards, they are better positioned to serve asset managers, fintech platforms, and payment processes that requires licensed partners. Market impact. This model could change how financial services are built and delivered instead of essentially competing with traditional banks from outside. Licensed crypto firms are becoming part of the infrastructure that powers payment, lending essentially, and asset custody worldwide. Crypto firms like Ripple, Circle, and Kraken are taking bold steps towards full banking integration. By seeking a US charter and direct Fed access, they aim to strengthen their stablecoin offerings, comply with essentially evolving laws, and reduce dependency on third-party providers. These moves are not about essentially abandoning essentially crypto roots, but about reshaping finance from within. While this shift brings major advantages like faster settlements, institutional trust, and global reach, most importantly, it also introduces new risk. Regulatory pushback, compliance costs, and market volatility could test the model. Still, by mid-2025, the trend is clear. Crypto firms are not waiting for permission. They're building regulated infrastructure to compete on the same level as traditional banks. Just to put that, just to say that again. Crypto companies essentially are not waiting for permission. They're building regulated infrastructure to compete on the same level as traditional banks, with Ripple, Circle, and Kraken leading the way. As I said for the longest time, Ripple is not here to play nice. They're here for a takeover. And that's why certain entities will weaponize to go against them, because they knew one day Ripple will be a massive threat to JP Morgan, to essentially other banking firms out there and so on. And that's why they were weaponized to go against Ripple. Bottom is they lost. Ripple's winning day by day, especially with these regulations coming through now and the banking license they're going to be getting. But Ripple essentially having the US banking charter license and access to the Fed account with the licenses they already have achieved around the world, that is that flip of the switch everybody's been talking about for the longest time. Not really the ISO switch, it's what Ripple's going to turn on, which is their infrastructure. Now, on that note, we have also reached the endings of tonight's live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, this was called the CMF Live. It stands for Crypto Miles Family. My name is Miles. You can tune to this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time, where I share the most recent news regarding cryptocurrency, CBDCs, AI, politics, and essentially Web3 news and regulation news. So if you want to be informed about any of those news topics, always tune into this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. This was episode 339 of the CMF Live. Episode 340 is going to be tomorrow. So definitely tune tomorrow. If you already haven't followed and subscribed, follow and subscribe and turn on your bell notification icons when I go live. Even though it is 10 p.m. essentially London time onwards every Monday to Friday, still turn on your bell notifications. Thank you so much to everybody who has liked this live, retweeted this live, and put a comment outside the live. Honestly, thank you so much to every single one of you CMF members or even new members who have liked this live on X, or have retweeted this live on X and put a comment outside essentially on X as well. If you haven't done that, CMF members, take 1 second to like and retweet this live. It goes a long way, trust me. And also, if you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much to everyone who has already liked this live and put a comment outside the live. If you haven't, again, take 1 second to like and essentially put a comment outside the live also. Before we do go, let's go to the comment section first, and then we'll call it the night. Let's see where we were at. We were at here. SpaceX. How near are we to get those 3 green lights approved? Very near. SpaceX launches 2 more communication satellites. Thank you, Ian, for the update. Night, Miles and CMF. Pablo, see you tomorrow, same time as usual. Miles, I think we can actually start leaving Bitcoin in the ashes. I agree, freedom forever. Ray, let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Thanks, Miles. Stormy, no problem. See you tomorrow, Stormy, same time as usual. Great live as always. Thanks, Miles. Good night, and see you tomorrow, same time. Let's go, Autistic. See you tomorrow, same time. Thank you, Miles and CMF. Mike, see you tomorrow about the same time as usual. Good night, Miles and CMF and all CMF. Thank you for a great live and news. Let's go, JP. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Stormy, Miles, let's go, Stormy. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Great to be with you again. Let's go, Paul. See you tomorrow, brother, same time as usual. Good night, Miles and family. Great life. Many thanks. See you tomorrow. Ian, see you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Miles, Ripple will get the banking license once the case is over, right? Should do. Yes, 100%. When the case is over, it has no excuses. Thanks, Miles, for your time. Good night, CMF family. Let's go, Orphans. Same time as usual. See you tomorrow. Take care, Miles and CMF. Thanks for all you do. Let's go, Ray. See you tomorrow. Same time as usual. Good night, Miles and CMF. Great news. See you tomorrow. Free and forever. See you tomorrow. Same time as usual. Great night. Good night, Miles and the CMF family. Funky brother. See you tomorrow. Same time as usual. Mike, let's go. See you tomorrow. Mike, brother. Funky brother. Let's go. See you tomorrow. Thanks, brother. Great live. Commenter, see you tomorrow, same time as usual. Ronnie, see you tomorrow, same time as usual. Troy, see you tomorrow, same time as usual. Callie, Miles, thank you so much, brother. Knowledge is wisdom. Let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. And Sam, thank you so much for the £20 donation. Absolutely amazing. Love you all. I will see you all tomorrow. Thanks, Miles. Have a good night. Night and day, CMF. Shelly, let's go. Shelly, see you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Thank you as well. And see you tomorrow, same time as usual. I'll see everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual. Everybody have a great day or a good night, depending on where you are around the world. CMF, thank you, Miles, for another wonderful and amazing live. The CMF appreciates you. Joe, thank you so much for the kind words as well. I will see everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual. Everybody have a great day or a good night, depending on where you are around the world. CMF, see you tomorrow for episode 340 of the CMF Live. Like, follow, comment, subscribe, retweet if you already haven't. If you have, thank you so much. Good night, Miles and CMF. Thank you. Call us. Let's go. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. See everybody tomorrow, same time as usual. 10 p.m. London time.